Hey folks, Chamia here with the Just Chamia Show with Miss Cutie Pie, Natasha Harden of Halmoni. So, Natasha, before we get into everything, tell us, what are you reading and what are you listening to?
What am I reading? What am I listening to? I've been listening to a lot of Little Dragon lately. And a lot of like rocksteady dub reggae.
Okay.
Because I'm getting ready for the summer.
Okay.
What am I reading? Right now I have a couple of books on like branding that I've been reading lately because this year in my business I'm trying to make everything really solid and pivot a little bit, and so I want to make sure that in order to grow my business I want my branding and everything to be solid.
Okay,
so
awesome.
That's what I've been working on.
All right. Okay, and we're going to talk about the store in a little bit, but for those who don't know you, tell us, who is Natasha from the Boogie Down?
Who is Natasha? I am an entrepreneur. I am a lover. I am a community member. I am a plus size diva. I wear many hats and I like to think that I can be and do anything that I want.
Love it. Love it. So I want to get your opinion on a couple of news stories and just share with people maybe some stories that they hadn't heard yet. So the first, this week, today actually, marks the 50th anniversary of the March in Selma across the bridge. And last week, the Department of Justice released their report on their findings in Ferguson. So they did a review of the police department and the judicial system in Ferguson, and released this really scathing, in my opinion, horrible report on the current situation there in terms of law enforcement. Before I get into the question that I have for you, I want to ask you this. In your opinion, is an 18 or 19-year-old person grown? Would you consider like an 18 or 19-year-old coming to hit you up like, hey boo, is that a grown boy, man, woman? Is that 18 or 19-year-old grown?
I think an 18 and 19-year-old, you know,
legally they're an adult.
When I can think back to being 18 and 19,
yeah.
I think that the 18 and 19-year-old thinks they're grown. But and I think legally at 18 you are supposed to be technically grown, but I don't think that you are. And I think that you're like still a baby, like maybe leaving the nest at that point. And so no, I wouldn't say that you're grown at 18 or 19, not at all.
I agree with you.
Life experience can maybe, of course, there's a special situation for everything, but I think generally, I don't think that you're grown at 18 or 19 years old.
Okay. Something to think about as we think about or consider all of the young people in America who are being held accountable for actions and decisions that they make, 14 years old, 15-year-olds, or even 18 or 19-year-old. But just this past Friday, another unarmed black boy, 19-year-old, Tony Robinson, was killed by a police officer in Madison, Wisconsin. Had you heard about this?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So I hadn't heard about this in mainstream media either, but in finding this story online and thinking of the anniversary of Selma, thinking about this DOJ article report that was just released last week, and then yet here again is another unarmed black boy killed by another police officer. What do you think about that?
I think that it fucking sucks. And I think that our country and our law enforcement has a long way to go, and I don't know, I can't say that I see anything really positive that's gonna happen. Maybe I'm pessimistic, but I think that the world hates black people, especially black men, and I don't know what could ever fix that. Okay,
so this scary stigma down with the black men, you think it's broader than an American problem? You think it's a global issue?
Of course, I think it's a global issue, but I think in the United States, for whatever reason, maybe because that's just my world, I think that it feels like it's more of a problem in the United States than it is globally.
Okay. So Black Lives Matter is a campaign. Some call it a movement. Some call it a marketing ploy, whatever you want to call it. You've heard it.
Absolutely.
First, when you hear Black Lives Matters, what does that mean to you? And then as a statement, do you believe it? So first, what does it mean to you when you hear Black Lives Matter? And then as a statement, do you believe it?
What do I feel when I hear Black Lives Matter?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's something that needs to be said, and maybe, there needs to be this campaign that's happening, because I think that people, for the most part, think that if they're not talking about it, then it doesn't exist, and so it's not something that has to be addressed. And so I think by creating this campaign or this phrase for people to have in their heads, I think that it's just kind of trying to put it in front of people's minds and in front of their eyes so that it can be addressed.
Okay, do you believe it? Black Lives Matter.
Oh, absolutely. My father is Black. I've had Black partners before. I'm half Black. And so Black lives do matter. And living on this earth for 33 years, I've seen many times where Black lives don't matter, either don't matter or don't matter as much as someone else. And it's very heartbreaking. And so I think that, and I'm hoping that, because I think ever since Occupy, at least in my eyes, I feel like there's been activism in a much different way than it's been in many years. And so I'm hoping that the activism that is happening will definitely make things happen.
I hope so. President Obama was in Selma this week. Al Sharpton and a lot of others in the civil rights movement community were in Selma to commemorate that march. But things like this are happening every day. So hopefully we'll get recognition. Hopefully we'll hear more about this in the news so that Tony Robinson's won't, just get swept under the rug. So rest in peace, Tony Robinson, and condolences and blessings to his family. Do you know Andrea Shea King?
No.
Okay, so she's a Tea Party radio host who earlier this month went on a radio rant when the Congressional Black Caucus members decided that they weren't going to attend the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech in Washington. So they decided they weren't going to attend. She went on this radio rant saying things like the Congressional Black Caucus members, should pay with their lives by being hanging from a noose in front of the U.S. Capitol building. She called them criminals. She called their constituents who voted them into office, stupid and heinous and dumb clucks, and said that everyone would be Black if they were set on fire and burned. Had you heard about this?
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm laughing.
Did you know?
I'm laughing because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think it's insane that people talk like that. I don't know. I did not hear about that, but I think that just like your question right before this, all of that is connected. And so this woman obviously, I don't know.
So for me, journalistically speaking, I'm torn because I believe in free speech and the right to free speech and say what you think and say what you feel. But where is the line between that and spewing hate? And should there be a line drawn? And if you Google this person's name, so it wasn't a major news story, but I found it on your web, so thank you for that, yourweb.com. Shout outs to you, big ups. Wasn't a major news story on major media, but should we be hearing about things like this where people who are on the air are doing things like this? If you Google her name today, beautiful pictures come up, her radio network comes up, but not this particular story. Do you think that these are the type of things that we should be hearing about, that we should, take action against, or, just we should talk about?
I think that we should talk about it, and I think that just like how people are always being made an example of something, I think that this is a perfect example where, and I don't know the network, I think the network needs to step in and say, yes, you can say there is freedom of speech, but where do we draw the line? And so I think, I don't know if she needs to lose her job over it, but I think that publicly there needs to be something that's said,
and not a general, oh, my bad, I'm sorry,
or like, oh, that's just how she talks, or like just to let her keep going. So,
and it made me think of, I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago there was this whole outcry with Paula Deen. Paula Deen is a TV chef. Well, she's a restaurateur, etc., and has lots of African American or black staff. And there was a story that got out about how she was relating to her black help, and it led to television shows being canceled, book deals being canceled, magazines, and a lot of different things like that. Why should Paula Deen be singled out, and then a person like Andrea Shea King not be equally singled out? Like, when is it okay to say, I mean, Paula Deen, I think maybe she used the N-word, and this lady said that, people should be hanging from a noose in front of a Capitol. Okay. Oh, yeah.
And I think that, and of course my diplomatic brain is trying to think of like, well, what is the difference? Like, why did she get treated differently than this woman? It's like, maybe Paula Deen got more blast because it's not in her job description to talk in that way, whereas this woman, she's a journalist and she's always talking about politics, and so her being able to say what she wants, I think, is allowed in a certain way, but I think she absolutely crossed the line.
Yeah. It's just, for me, it brings up an issue of when are even journalists held accountable. You look at Juliana Rancic, who recently, after the Oscars, made some comments about Zendaya's hair smelling like patchouli or weed oil. She apologized for it. You think about Brian Williams, who misremembered his experience during the Iraq War after 9/11 and where he was reporting from, and he was suspended but not fired. And then you have this woman. Nothing has happened.
Yeah, something like that needs to happen where she, at least someone is saying, what she said wasn't okay.
Yeah. We'll see. Okay, the Nigerian Tribune published an article about a woman who went to court to have her 1-week marriage dissolved because she said it hurt too much to have sex with her husband. He was too big for her. And people in the courtroom laughed and, all of that, made a joke about it because the thought is that most women pray for a large-sized penis. But anyway, not to have one, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Anyway, the husband agreed to the dissolution of the marriage if she would pay back the dowry. Had you heard about this story? Pretty interesting, right? I actually found out about this from a Korean news source and then went back and found the original. But anyway, more interesting to me than the story were some of the comments. And I don't know if a lot of people actually read the comments online when people publish things,
hateful
or
things
stories.
People say.
So some of the things that some of the comments were, hopefully she wasn't a child bride. Aren't black women supposed to have big vaginas to, compensate for their men having, big members and things like that? Had you seen that or read these comments?
That's hateful.
Isn't it? I black women have bigger vaginas. Did you know? I didn't know.
Newsflash.
Right. But I mean, as I hear about these things, I wonder, are people really thinking this way? Do they really think these things, or are they just saying stupid stuff?
I think it's both. I'm a city girl, so I've mostly lived in big cities my whole life. And I can't say that I've really been much of a small town person. And not to say that that's where most of this comes from, but I think that in certain places of the world, maybe in the United States, to just talk about, I think that maybe people have never had experiences with black people. They've never had black people in their town. They've never interacted with black people, and I think that they, maybe people just make up these crazy stories, just like how Asian women's vaginas go a certain way because our eyes are slanted. I think that it's almost like being in elementary school mentality where no one has ever told you so, or I don't know, because you can easily Google things, people.
Right.
Or I don't know.
But we're human beings. We're not like a different species of people, you know, and not all one size applies to any person or anything. Mm-hmm. Not all people of any particular ethnicity look alike, act alike, think alike, are alike, but it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
All right.
I think especially with women's bodies, that is just really problematic.
Yeah. Get your lives, people. All right. So the SF Weekly wrote an article about casting a wider net and how Silicon Valley CEOs are dealing with their diversity issue. So first of all, I want to shout out and give a big ups to Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition for bringing this issue, the lack of diversity in Silicon Valley, to the forefront. So thank you for that. Shout outs, big ups. But nonetheless, the SF Weekly wrote this article, Casting a Wider Net. Had you seen that article? Heard about it?
I knew that Jesse Jackson was here for a diversity panel thing here in the Bay Area, and I have a lot of friends who are in tech, and I have some folks who do diversity work in tech, so I'm a little bit familiar with that. Okay, so from your friends' perspectives who are in tech, have they commented that diversity is an issue in their experience? Absolutely. Okay. I think that there is no diversity, and I think that living in the Bay Area, especially Oakland, right now, we can see that happening because, you know, from the Silicon Valley, it's now coming into San Francisco and now spilling over into Oakland, and I think that you can see how the diversity is leaving Oakland, which was Oakland was one of the top 3 places to live in the United States that had the highest diversity. And so I think that we're seeing how it's affecting cities now and not just this industry. In Silicon Valley. And that was actually one of my questions to you is this just a tech specific issue? The lack of diversity in the tech industry. No, it's not. It's where you're eating your food. It's where you're buying your groceries. It's the people who are living next door to you. It's much bigger than just an industry thing. So some companies, Intel, Google, they've allocated some money. They've thrown some money at it and say, okay, let's try to fix it, throw some money at it. We'll see what comes of that. How do you think companies go about addressing diversity and fixing the diversity problem? I hate calling it a diversity problem. It's really a lack of diversity. Mm-hmm. I think that, and it's so interesting that I feel like this is this topic I feel like I know a lot about. But I think that what they're doing is white women is their diversity card. So it's like tech is all white men, and so in order for us to be diverse, we're just going to employ more white women, and that's our diversity. And maybe if we want to throw in some POC, it's going to be women of color. And I think that diversity is so much more than that. Diversity is diversity in size. I think diversity can be, you know, working with someone who's genderqueer, working with someone who's gender neutral. I think that working with trans people, I think that diversity is huge. And I think that tech is thinking so small, which I think is really interesting because to me, tech is like having access to the internet, which means you have access to the world. Right. And so easily, I think someone who's in tech can use their keyboard and type in one word and learn so much about it. And so I think that easily by just typing in diversity in your keyboard into a Google search, you can know what diversity is. And so by just employing white women or women of color and thinking that that's diverse enough, I think it's just a cop-out. One of the interesting things in this particular article, they interviewed a black woman who said that she was employed at Google very early on. And when she went in, it was a very white environment, white and a few Asian, and she felt very out of place. She was older. She was in her 40s, I believe, at the time. She was older. She was one of very few black faces.
and it was an environment made to feel very uncomfortable there. So as these companies are looking at increasing their diversity, and I think what the point that you made about adding some more white women is not the way to fix or address the diversity problem, but as they bring in more diverse employees, having the numbers is one thing, having a supportive environment is another.
Exactly.
And so can you talk a little bit too, I mean, you are a woman of color, a business owner as well. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience starting a business as a person of color in an environment, Oakland, where you mentioned, you know, that it's changing, the gentrification that's happening here in the city?
So I think in store, being the face of my business and working in my own shop, I think that in that space alone, people never believe that I own the shop. They only think that I work here.
Wow.
And so that's one way that I see.
You look so UC Berkeley. She cannot work. She don't own this. You know? She's a grad student.
But I'm also a brown woman, and I think when you think of vintage, when you think of little shops in Oakland, I'm going to say specifically vintage, you think of white, skinny women. Mm-hmm. And so I think that when people find out that I'm the owner here, I think that they're shocked because I'm brown. They're shocked because I'm fat. They're shocked because I'm not dressed like Leave It to Beaver's mom. Yeah. So I see it in that way. And please give me the question again.
Well, let me just ask you this question. What would be your message from business owner to a Zuckerberg or the CEO of Intel, all of these companies in Silicon Valley and across these other industries, pharmaceutical industry, etc., that have a diversity issue, a lack of diversity issue? What would be your message from business owner to business owner, from CEO to CEO? How do they fix it?
I think that I'm really tired of hearing, but there's no one out there.
Yeah.
We've looked and we can't find anybody. I think that especially in tech, and for me too, I'm self-taught, and I think that folks in tech, not everybody goes to coding school. Not everybody is doing computer science and computer programming in college or going to college. And so I think that they have to throw their net out in a different way, or maybe like, oh, we're fishermen who can just do this kind of casting. Let's maybe consult with this fisherman who can fish in anything. Throw the fish out in the net in the swamp and catch fish. And so I think that you have to look in places where you might not expect people to be in your industry. It's just like how, you know, model people, they're like, oh, you can find a model at a farmer's market, you can find a model at the supermarket. And I think you can find coders, software developers, web developers, all of those people anywhere. You just have to just knock on the door a little bit. And I think it's that easy.
Yeah. There it is. Cast a wider net.
Tech people
are
who
there.
create content and have control of the world, basically.
Right. All the databases. You mean in all the databases?
Oh, you don't know. Okay.
Give them the look. Shame, right?